Genesis says, "Unto the woman God said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow at conception. In sorrow you shall bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over he." Then we skip over to Numbers, and we see, oh, I'm so sorry. Now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known a man by lying with him. But all the young girls who have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. Then we can skip all the way over to Ephesians, where we see this line: "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. He is the body, he is the Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, also should wives to submit to their husbands in everything." And finally, in Timothy, we see, "Let a woman learn in all silence and subjection. I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp its authority over a man, but to be in silence." Over and over, this book proves that it doesn't really value women very much at all. They are to remain silent. They are punished unfairly and unequally for the same original sin. They're given painful childbirth and told that the only way they can redeem themselves is through that painful childbirth. And if we're honest, what do you think they meant by "keep the virgin girls for yourself"? What do you suppose they were doing with those virgin girls that made them more valuable than the not virgin girls? Over and over, the Bible teaches sexist and misogynistic messages, but there are a lot of people out there who think that we're misinterpreting this, that we're, reading this in the wrong way, that there's some context that gives justification for the constant subjugation of women. If you're one of those people and you think that I'm just not understanding God's word, then call the show, because it starts right now. Greetings and welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Forrest Valkai, and I am fixing the audio issue that stumbled me up during that initial reading there. Had to pull my headphone out because all I could hear was my own stupid voice ringing in my ears. And now that is done, hi. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Forrest Valkai, a professional at this thing that just messed it up. And I'm joined today by the incredibly more competent Godless engineer. John, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. I don't think I'm more competent, but I am here, and I had to reload everything on my end to get the sound back, but I'm good.
I love the fact that we have been here for almost an hour, fixing our issues, making sure we do tech checks and everything before the show. And sure enough, the moment the show begins, both of us have so many problems. It's a great day here on the Atheist Experience. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching. Before we get started, I have a couple of things that I want to tell everybody. The first one is that the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. The second thing is that we've got a really cool show for you today. I've just checked the call screen right before we started, and we've already got a ton of really good calls. If you're a theist and you want to talk about theism, atheism, creationism, if you have questions, comments, or concerns about, the human rights and humanism and LGBT people, if pronouns trigger you and upset you, this is the show to call into, because this organization has always been incredibly progressive and open and trying to make the world a slightly better and slightly less God-fearing place. The number there on the bottom of the screen, 512-991-9242, or visit tiny.cc/callaxp to call in through them internets. Before we get started, though, we have a couple of quick things. We have a question of the week, which is the thing that we do here. Before we get started, let me pull this over here. We have a share your experience question this week. Last week, we asked you, what advice would you expect from Satan? And here are our top three favorites. We've got number 3, Satan's advice: when turning the other cheek, also be prepared to duck. Okay. Number 2, Satan's advice: number of the beast is not 666, it is actually 69, if you know what I mean. Beastly. And finally, number 1, Satan's advice: most fruits are safe to eat, including the one God said not to, because God is a liar. but you should also stay away from Ray Comfort's banana. Horrific. Truly horrific. For the next week's question, if you would like to have your comment read on the screen, you can answer this question down in the chat, down in the comments section. The prompt for this week is a title a Bible story in a clickbaity way. Clickbaity titles for a title story. I like that. John, do you have one to start us off with?
Oh yes, I definitely do. I worked on this today actually, and I verified, like I went the extra mile and I verified that it is a correct title, like it accurately describes the thing. So mine is, this chapter of the Bible contains 5 war crimes. You won't believe number 3.
I mean, which chapter of the Bible isn't it that contains 5 war crimes? So many. Oh man. We've got a bunch of great calls and I really like that's really good. I was going to do something stupid about like, these kids made fun of a bald man. You won't believe what happens next. But like, that's so much better. We've got a bunch of great calls on the line and I'm really excited to get into them. So do you want to just jump right in? Like, as we could do more announcements and things, but like, honestly, like, we could also do a show. What do you want to do?
No, I'm good with calls. I love taking calls. So
right, it is the thing that we're here to do. All right, cool. So we've got a bunch of them lining up, and I'm going to jump right in with Chris, pronouns he, him, calling in from Florida, says from Liberty University. Don't know why that's in there. Want to know what it will take for the hosts to believe. Chris, you are on the Atheist Experience with John and Forrest. How are you doing today?
First, let me say it's an honor because I've been watching your Evolution YouTube channel, so it's kind of cool to actually get to speak to you.
I don't recommend that, but thank you very much. I appreciate you tuning in.
I think the reason why it says Liberty is because I wanted to put a qualification, and I told the lady that I attended Liberty Home Bible Institute, and I tend to call it Diet Liberty because you're not really there, but you're getting the information.
Okay, so it's not Liberty University, it's a different thing?
Well, it's the home version, basically. Like, they send you the workbooks, and they send you the stuff, and you fill it out and all that.
Oh.
But my main question I wanted to ask you, one of my favorite atheist YouTubers, Paul Gia, says that every atheist has a different standard of what it would take to believe, what it would take to convince them. I was curious of what it would take you two gentlemen to believe.
John, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, honestly, it's just simply evidence, like for God. I mean, as far as God goes now, like if you're talking about Yahweh, the biblical God, or any other like real definition of a God that we have, I'm not exactly sure what would convince me, just because of how that God is described in the Bible. He seems to be pretty contradictory to reality. So I would think that it would have to be something like quite profound in order to get me to actually believe that God exists. But God in general, I think that, some kind of evidence showing a like suspension of the natural order of reality, something that can't be explained by natural processes as they exist now, or not now, just natural processes, as they exist in reality. So, I mean, that's a rather high bar, I admit, but I feel like religion places that high bar on itself by its claims, even a very basic claim of a God. So it would be evidence, but that evidence would have to be like really good.
Yeah, the Bible several times when God proves his existence, it's like water comes out of a stone. There's a pillar of fire in the sky and a pillar of smoke in the day. And there's, the seas part and sticks turn into snakes. And there's like all these like really, really crazy ways that God proves himself. And now you skip forward to today, and the proof that we get for God is like, look at the trees. And have you tried praying for a long time and being really dehydrated? And maybe I had a dream once. And like, that's, for me, just not good enough. So I'll be honest with you, if I really sit down and think about it and think about the kind of stuff that would jump out to me as like maybe edging on supernatural, I don't know for sure what that would look like, because if I were to go back, a couple thousand years ago and show somebody my smartphone, they would probably think that was magic. and it just isn't. And so if something were to show up to me today that I would think is magic, I wouldn't have a way of ruling out that this isn't some crazy advanced technology, that it isn't aliens, or that I'm not just high or having a psychotic break. Maybe I was drugged. Maybe I went insane. Maybe something happened to me. And maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe there's a gas leak in the house. So like, because I can't rule those out, I have a hard time nailing down what exactly would convince me. However, if this God is real and is as powerful as he claims, he knows exactly what it would take to convince me beyond a shadow of a doubt. He can read my mind. He can read my heart. He knows whatever that means. He can tell what exactly it would take to absolutely 100% sway me. And if that were to happen, I would then be still right here on this show as a theist saying God is definitely real and here's all the reasons you shouldn't worship it. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Okay, so well, no, I have a couple more because I've never called in, but I've wanted to. I wanted to ask you, I was reading a quote from a prominent atheist, can't remember the guy's name. He said if God were to come to him right now and reveal himself, he would think it was a delusion. So in some cases, there may be some people that nothing would fully convince them. Nothing God could do would convince them. But also, as another question on to that is one of my friends, Becky, who is a theist turned atheist, she told me the other day that even if God were to reveal himself in a convincing fashion, if he said, I am Yahweh, everything in the Bible is true. Yes, human hands may have fudged up some things, but for the most part, everything is true. She wouldn't worship him. She'd believe he was real. She couldn't be an atheist, but if everything is true, Sodom and Gomorrah, all that, she wouldn't want to worship him. So the question is, even if you were convinced, would you want to worship Yahweh?
Well, that's what I just said a second ago, is that like, yes, there are certainly some people who will not be convinced, just as there are plenty of theists who will not be convinced. I've talked to some on this show that say there's nothing you can possibly say to change my mind, period. But also, as I just said a second ago, yeah, even if this God was real, I wouldn't be a fan. I would want nothing to do with it. So you could prove to me that it's real. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, I'm not worshiping a monster. So I'll sit right here and be a theist, but I'm still going to be an anti-theist theist, if that makes any sense.
Well, I'm kind of curious.
Let me ask you one.
Hold on. John had something. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why it always goes to why wouldn't you worship that? Like if God showed that he exists, why wouldn't you worship him? Like I don't understand why it automatically goes that direction. Like why isn't it good enough that we acknowledge that your God exists? Why do we then have to worship him? Like that seems to be sort of used in a pejorative fashion there, and I just don't understand that. Like why is it important to you that we worship him?
Actually, it's not in the larger sense. It's important to the atheists that I know and care about because I don't want them to go to hell. But in the larger sense,
is that really? Sorry to interrupt, but is that like I'm just wondering if you can kind of use your critical thinking skills here. If I don't worship this God, he's going to burn me in hell forever, like for just simply not bending the knee and worshiping him. Do you think that that's a reasonable thing to do? Like, would you characterize God as a reasonable being for burning people in hell for eternity just for simply not worshiping his ass?
I agree. I would not, but it does say my ways aren't your ways.
But sorry, then the follow-up question, the necessary follow-up question then, is an unreasonable and cruel and self-righteous and self-important, vindictive, evil, torturing God worthy of worship?
But see, when you say evil, though, and vindictive, we're looking at it from a human perspective. We're not looking at it through God's eyes.
Why is God special?
That's not what I asked you.
But if he were those things, no. But I don't necessarily see him as evil.
You don't think that it's evil to torture somebody for not praising you?
I mean, in the sense of God giving fair warning to everyone, saying, "Hey, do this," or else.
I'm sorry. If I give my son fair warning that he must worship at my feet every single time I come into the house, and he doesn't, and therefore I spend the rest of his life torturing him, is that like just because I gave him fair warning? Does that make it okay?
But obviously, you're Bob, though. You're a random person. You're not God of the
Right.
everything.
So God is special. Do you understand special pleading? Like that's a fallacy. You're basically making a special argument for God, saying that God is special in this situation and isn't bound by the normal ethical standards that humans have. And I just don't see why God has that special hall pass for ethics and morality. Like, I mean, I understand it from a religious perspective that, you kind of have to make this special pleading argument, but why can't you understand that it is a fallacy and that God should not be considered above this very basic ethical standard?
Honestly, to be real with you, there is debate within the Christian community whether or not you're even tortured. What hell could very well just be separation from God. You may not even be tortured.
We're asking you, though. I'm not talking. There's over 40,000 denominations of Christianity. There's no point in us sitting here and trying to hash through all of them. I'm asking you, your reason when John asked you, why is it important for you to worship this thing? You were saying, well, I don't want you to go to hell. So it seems like hell's a bad place to be. It's a place that you don't want people to go to. How very charitable of you to be concerned about us going to this bad place. The question is, why does this bad place exist in the first place? What kind of a douchebag would punish people in any regard for not worshiping him? We're not talking about us going up and punching God. We're not talking about us going out and hurting God. We're not talking about us doing anything negative to God. It's just not constantly stroking his ego is enough for him to do any level of horrible things to us, from the most benign being, just a separation and you're just annihilated, to the most literal translations where people say that it is conscious, eternal torment in fire. And you've got 40,000 variations between the two. Any of them is completely unjustifiable. So the question again, why does God get a special pass to be an asshole?
Because first off, I don't believe you'll be tortured. I believe hell is just separation. Because a lot of scholars say you can't have eternal darkness with eternal fire, which are both, it's in the word, but in the Bible. So I believe.
I'm sorry.
You want us to go to hell if it's not that bad.
Tortured.
Right. I get a question here. So I'm piggybacking off of what Forrest just said. Didn't you just say earlier that you were concerned about your atheist friends or friends that didn't believe because they would go to hell and it's like some kind of bad thing? I can't remember exactly if you said anything about torture or anything like that, but I kind of feel like you were definitely saying it as if it is going to be a bad experience. If we're just simply cut off from God and we're not like tortured by flesh-eating worms that gnaw on us every single day. Why would you care? Like, it seems to me like being cut off from God or whatever you think, we're not going to be tortured. It just seems like what atheists already think happens, and that's nothing happens. We're just gone. Like, why would that be a bad like, why would you think that, I don't want that to happen to somebody? Yeah, I mean, you're going to be in heaven anyways, as far as the Bible describes. I mean, you're just going to be happy. There's no sadness or anything. Like, there's no suffering in heaven and everything. So, I mean, you're effectively changed in the first place as far as the Bible is concerned. So you wouldn't actually be sad or anything like that in heaven because your friends are cut off from God. So I guess I'm failing to understand why you're so concerned with their afterlife if you're actually not going to, have any negative repercussions yourself or anything like that. And they also are not going to have negative repercussions.
Well, no. I never said it wasn't negative. I said I don't believe they will be actively tortured. I believe hell is going to be a place where there's going to be a lot of hateful people. There's going to be a lot of anger, resentment, rage. I believe it's going to be self-imposed. It's not going to be fire. It's not going to be demons whipping you S&M style. It's going to be the hatred and anger you have felt within yourself, and that's going to be the torture. It's going to be you doing it to you, is what I believe. I don't believe you're going to be in fire and.
So basically, I'm just hating everybody like that's around me in hell. Like, is that what it is? Because it kind of feels like certain social situations now. Are we in hell now?
That's what well, think about it. We have all these horrible things on earth, but we still have love. We still have the beauty of a butterfly landing on a flower. We still do have good things in this horrible earth.
What if I hate that? What if I hate a butterfly landing on a flower? Like, what if what I consider to be beautiful is completely opposite to what you consider to be beautiful?
But you can still see it, though. Like you can still find what you consider to be beautiful and see it, and you experience it.
What if I find
I don't
hatred
understand what that has
beautiful?
to do with anything.
Yeah, I don't know, but what if I find hatred beautiful? Like, what if I'm
he's
some
a
crazy
sociopath?
psychopath?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
What if then I'm going to heaven? It seems like is hell then more like heaven? Like, how does I don't understand God's standards.
Hell
here.
is only butterflies on flowers all the time. It's a nightmare.
You get to hell and it's like, what the fuck is this? I hate butterflies on flowers.
Damn it.
The snozberries taste like snozberries, and that pisses me off.
If you find the horrible things beautiful, then like you said, hell will be your heaven. But before I go, I do want to ask one more question. It's got nothing to do with the topic, but I've always wanted to ask Forrest this, and this is probably the only chance I get to ask him this.
Okay.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't covered any ground at all, but go for it.
I've been a viewer of your evolution channel since you started doing it, and I've been dying to. I've asked in the comments and never got an answer. You do a lot of the Reactaria videos, which I actually find really entertaining, even though I don't agree with you. I find them entertaining and fun to watch. You don't ever really do it on Muslim creationists, and I have found multiple videos. Mm-hmm. How come it's only Christian creationists?
3 major reasons. Number one, I can't find any like decent Muslim creationist videos that are like interesting or fun. So like for me to react to a video, it also has to be interesting for me or funny to me to do the thing. I couldn't even tell you how many videos out there are creationists saying dumb stuff that are just boring to watch, and it wouldn't be, there's nothing for me to build off of there. So it just suck. Number 2, I live in America, and there's double-digit Christian churches within walking distance of my house. There is one mosque in my town. So like Christianity, and especially evangelical Christianity, is what is affecting me and my neighbors the most all the time, socially and politically. That's why it's going to be something I talk about. That's why I talk about Christianity more often than not on this show. It's the reason why I open the show by talking about the Bible and not the Quran, because that is what is currently, being a problem for me in my life all the time. And then third and most importantly, is that a lot of those videos there's a significant language barrier, and it just wouldn't be functional for me. I could try to parse through it, but it would inevitably end up with me missing something that they're saying, taking something they're saying out of context or out of turn because I don't understand what they're getting at. And also the people who would need to hear it the most, who would benefit the most from that video, wouldn't be able to understand me for the exact same reasons. I have a friend from Egypt who sends my videos to his Muslim family all the time to try to talk to them, and they're like, I can't understand half what this guy's saying because they don't speak English and I'm not speaking Arabic. And so like it's a target market issue, it is a quality of content issue, and also it is just not the audience that is most likely going to be listening to or benefiting from the video in the first place. So if there was a really interesting and funny something I could make into something that make fun, not make fun of, but like make it fun. You know what I mean? If there was a good video like that about Islam and creationism, I'd be all over it. But I have included, like I did a bunch of You Laugh, You Lose videos at one point just to try that. And one of those did include a Muslim guy, like putting like a bunch of rocks into a bag and shaking it up and making a smartphone come out and be like, see, this is what atheists do. So like that was that. It was just a shorter version of it because that was a funny video of decent quality that I could talk about. You know what I mean?
If I can add, well, hold on. If I so sorry, I got stuck on repeat there. If I can add, I just want to ask you this question, like what would be the difference in a Muslim creationist and a Christian creationist in this particular situation? Like, I don't understand like the difference there. Like what arguments do they make exactly that are different than what would be covered under like, reviewing a Christian creationist video?
Okay, I'll tell you. I am a Christian. I'm not a Muslim, but I will say the Muslim creation videos I've seen, they seem to make better arguments than the Christian creationists do.
I have not seen that whatsoever. Just like Forrest was talking about here, I've seen both Christians and creationists put Legos into a bag, shake it up, and pull out some kind of like airplane, helicopter, or whatever in the hell. And so they make the exact same arguments. And like I've reviewed, I mean, if you go to my channel, I have like a whole list of where I cover like Muslim videos, and especially creationist Muslim videos. And it basically boils down to the exact same arguments that Christians use. Either their holy book says a thing, or they have some kind of misunderstanding of science, or they have some kind of misunderstanding of probability, statistics. You pick and choose. Like, I mean, you just go through it and like it's all the exact same stuff. So I don't see why you have to address a Muslim in order for your content to be valid or to appease everybody.
The reason I asked, though, is because I have a friend who also watches your videos, but he is an atheist. And I said to him, I wonder why Forrest never does Muslim videos. He's like, oh, Forrest don't want that kind of heat. He ain't trying to get any bomb threats. So I just was like, I want to ask Forrest about that.
Oh, I can't hear Forrest. I don't know if anybody else can.
Sorry, that was my fault. Two things that are really important with that. Number one, I have no issues with criticizing Islam. I have done so on numerous occasions and will do so right now. Fuck Islam. It's just as bad as Christianity. And second of all, equating Islam with bomb threats and just drawing that line is inevitably going to be not an Islamophobic, but a Muslim-phobic trope. And so I would encourage your friend and you as well not to draw that line, because it kind of glosses over the fact that there are terrorists of all stripes, and there are plenty of Christian terrorists to go around as well. So just drawing that line there, it kind of just is a hasty overgeneralization that turns out into racism. Anyway, with that, I'm going to go to the next call now. I feel like we didn't really cover too much today, Chris, but I hope you call back and tell us a little bit more about why this God who will send you to hell, whatever that hell looks like, is worth your or anyone else's time and worship, because I'm not convinced. With that, we've got a bunch more calls on the line, but I'm trying to remember that I have a whole job here, and I have an announcement. And then I'm going to read a super chat, at least one. And then I'm going to tell you a cool thing that I'm doing that I'm excited about. And then we will take the next call. We're going to do those three things. We've got this is the announcement here. It says, we're excited to announce the return of the popular brick fundraiser. Apparently the bricks thing went over really well. So if you're into buying bricks to help support the ACA, this is your chance to do it. You can leave your mark on the atheist community of Austin on the actual physical location by purchasing an engraved brick. You contribute to the creation of a beautiful new patio that showcases the heartfelt messages of our generous donors. Each brick is inscribed with your personalized text. There's a couple of them out there that mention me, which is insane. It's just a lasting tribute of your support. You can join us in building a space that celebrates our community and the impact of your contributions. It's a super cool thing to do if you're into that sort of thing. So check that out. It's a fun way to support the ACA and also put some vulgar stuff on a brick forever. Who doesn't want to do that? We also have some super chats here. This one is 10 euros from Tina Witty. Buy a forest and create a company to take care of it, and then work for it yourself. Your business card could read Forest, Forestry, Forester. Don't miss that opportunity. You know what? You're right. And then Isaiah S. sent $5. Forrest, did we indeed evolve from filthy monkey men? What do you think we are now, dude? Boy, honestly, come on. We are filthy monkey men and filthy monkey women and filthy non-binary monkeys as well. We come in all stripes. Good for us. We got a bunch more. I'll read this last one. Child Free 334, $10. Thank you for making my deconstruction so much easier. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I'll leave the next ones for later. And now quickly before we get into the call, if you want to make the world a slightly better place, I have cool news for you as well. I mentioned the ACA's fundraiser. I'm also doing one, only as for Doctors Without Borders, which is a different organization entirely from the atheist community of Austin. But they're the ones who are saving lives all over the world in crisis zones like Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, Yemen, Chad, Congo. If you want to save lives all over the world, you can donate to Doctors Without Borders through my link through Roll for Initiative. My friends and I got together and we played a game of Tales of the Valiant. And we raised, so far, every single episode of this game is a fundraiser, and we have raised over $20,000 for Doctors Without Borders. So if you like TTRPG content, or even if you don't, if you wouldn't mind heading over to my channel and just hopping on any of those videos and leaving a donation, there is a donation link on each of the videos, and there's also a Tiltify in the description if you can't donate through YouTube, because some people can't. And if you want to buy some of this merch, you can also buy merch, and 100% of the proceeds of Roll for Initiative shirts and hoodies also goes to Doctors Without Borders. So those are all cool things that you can do if you want to help save lives all around the world. It would really mean a lot to me, especially if you do it through my link, so that I can keep track of it and then use those numbers to get bigger sponsors to do bigger fundraisers in the future. With that, we are now going to move on to more calls, and I'm probably going to mention things about that later. We've got... Oh, man. John, are you seeing the call screen at all?
Oh, no. Sorry,
I was going to ask if you had any preferences. Okay, I was going to ask if you had any preferences, but I think that I'm going to go with Andrew, no pronouns given, calling in from North Carolina, who is a theist who says that he can defend biblical slavery. Andrew, you are on the Atheist Experience with John and Forrest. How are you doing today?
What's up, guys? How's it going? I'm super excited. Thanks for letting me know.
I was having a great day until somebody said that they can defend slavery, and now I'm a little bit confused at how the rest of this day is going to go.
That's actually not what I was defending. What I was going to show is that biblical slavery is not what it's propped out to be. It's a lot different. People cherry pick
what is that?
Things from the Bible, and honestly, I just wanted
propped out to be?
Have a conversation around that.
What's it
can you explain that?
Kind of like American slavery. It's actually propped out to be kind of like American slavery, which is way different.
Can we be a bit more scholarly about it? Can we be a bit more scholarly about it? Because the claim is that the biblical slavery is chattel slavery. Like, at least that's one of the forms of slavery in the Bible. So that's specifically what we're talking about. We're talking about chattel slavery. That would be people that are owned as property. So that would be the more accurate way to do it, instead of comparing it to American slavery, which obviously had different ways of implementing it, had different motivations and everything like that when compared to ancient Near Eastern slavery. So if we can be a little bit more accurate about what our claim is, that would be great to start off this conversation.
Well, respectfully, I was getting into it, but what I was getting at is that the American slavery, number one, kidnapped everybody. And under verse 16 in Exodus 21, that would have caused all of them to die.
Right. Okay. So just to cut this off real quick.
Immediately no.
So just to cut this off, I tried to correctly contextualize it in that it's chattel slavery that we're concerned with. You're trying to shift it into comparing it to American slavery and all this other stuff. Still, I don't think that you're going to have a good time there, because like the American slavery that was imposed, they bought slaves from people in Africa and everything like that, and then transported them to a different country, which would still be part of Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. You can buy and purchase slaves from the countries around you. Now, this is a little bit more, extrapolating what countries around you mean, because they weren't buying slaves from like Canada or Mexico. Those particular countries didn't exist at the time, obviously, but they were still buying from countries outside of the what was considered the United States at the time, or the colonies, or anything that you want to consider there. So if we want to be completely accurate about it, the man-stealing section that you're talking about there is very much related to like the actual stealing of fellow Israelites and the stealing of people in general. This was in the wider Near East considered to be a very bad thing, and it was outlawed and everything like that. So this is actually similar to other societies in the ancient Near East that had laws against this. But it definitely wasn't a condemnation of slavery in general. And also the slaves that were purchased from the nations around the Israelites, they were either prisoners of war or acquired in any number of ways. So you're really not helping yourself out here by trying to make this distinction. Sorry to overtake that, Forrest.
No, by all means, because I was going to say something very similar. I was going to bring up Leviticus 25 when it says, like, buy your slaves from the heathens around you and things like that. Like, what exactly do you think? Do you think these people were, like, selling themselves? How do you think they acquired these? Like, also, the amount of times in the Bible where, like, they commit genocide and then they, like we said at the beginning of the video, they keep all the virgin girls for themselves. I don't know if that's a stretch to say these people were kidnapped. So, like, just the idea that you have to have this specific kind of kidnapping for it to be the kind of slavery that's bad, I don't understand. And I also don't understand why we're trying to differentiate this from American chattel slavery when, like, it is certainly chattel slavery. It doesn't matter if it falls completely into the American paradigm. There is no good slavery, period. So, like, if you're trying to draw a distinction and, like, well, it's not this kind of slavery, and well, it's slavery, but they did it these ways, I don't understand what your rhetorical goals here are, and I'm pretty positive I don't like them. But I'll let you respond to what John said first, and then we'll get back to that.
Yeah, but before you respond, I do want to point out how what Forrest just mentioned is considered by scholars. Like, you can look at Hector Avalos. He did an extensive write-up on this kind of stuff. He classifies Numbers 31 as actually being sexual slavery, but you could also classify most marriages that occur in the Bible to be sexual slavery because the consent of the women are not considered. Only the consent of their fathers or husbands or whatnot are the ones that are considered. Women are not generally asked for their consent, and so that in any relationship where you are forced into the relationship and it's a sexual relationship is considered sexual slavery, and this is actually confirmed by multiple scholars in the field. I can look up the exact scholar if you want me to, but I have a reference that analyzed, like, Roman society as far as sexual slavery goes, and this definitely falls within that paradigm.
Most definitely. Anyway, Andrew, that was a lot. What do you think about it?
I actually got to take it one at a time because you threw a million things. I could have done this.
We agree. So first off is chattel slavery. Like, the chattel slavery in the Bible is the exact same thing as the American chattel slavery as far as in classification. No. And so that's kind of where we're starting.
No, it's not. No, right. It's not. So first of all, if you injured a slave, you had to let them go. Deuteronomy 23, verse 15,
that's not true,
even points out that if a slave runs away, if they run away, they can't be reclaimed. And yes, it is true.
What kind of slave is that?
Part of the Torah, which is a 5.
What kind of slave is that?
Okay, so do you want me to define slavery from biblically or American slavery? Because they're two different things.
Okay, listen, the exact context that you're talking about here is in the Bible, so let's stick with the context that you provided. Mm-hmm. So in the Bible, you mentioned a portion where a slave runs away and they're supposed to not be given back to their person. So can you define what kind of slave they're talking about there?
Okay, again, so slavery in the Bible, that was not in God's ideal design.
It would be great if you would just answer John's question.
Okay, how about this? How about
you answer John's question?
Which was slavery.
No, how about you answer John's question?
One question. What was John's question? And make it one sentence.
Okay, so you weren't even listening. You don't even know what his question was.
What? Okay, so my question was, what kind of slave is in that passage that you quoted? That's my question.
Biblical slavery, but you're framing it differently.
No. Biblical slavery
could types of slaves in the Bible. So just saying biblical slavery doesn't narrow it down. What type of slave is the one that you were talking about that can run away and not be recaptured?
Any slave. Any slave can do that.
No. That's not it. What's the verse again? Can you give me the verse?
Deuteronomy 23:15. If a slave runs away, they don't have to be reclaimed. So it doesn't. There's a incentive that if you injured a slave, number one, you had to let them go. Read further in Exodus 21, and then when you go to Deuteronomy 23, you'll see that a slave can actually get away from the master. There's a strong incentive to actually treat them well. In fact, in Leviticus specifically, let me pull out my notes. Leviticus 25:53,
speaks that you cannot rule over them
Well,
ruthlessly. So this is
right.
not
Deuteronomy 23:15 is specifically talking about Hebrew slaves, and Hebrew slaves were treated differently than chattel slaves or foreign slaves. So you need to come up with a better apologetic for this.
Like that is the biggest thing that I don't think you're catching here, is that the Bible gives very clear instructions for Hebrew slaves and non-Hebrew slaves. So if it is a Hebrew slave, they have to be let go after 7 years. There's rules about, like, if you knock out their eye or their tooth, that you have to let them go. I'm pretty sure that one only applies to Hebrew slaves as well. There's rules that, like, after 7 years you let them go, and then they're free of whatever debts or whatever like that. Even then, there's also some caveats. For example, if this person came into slavery with a wife and child, then they get to keep the wife and child when they leave. But if they came in single, you can give that slave a wife and they can have children. And then even after they go free, their wife and children remain your slaves. And they, if they love their family, can declare, I love my family, I love my master. And you drive a spike through their ear into a door, and then they become your slave forever too. So even that has its own ridiculously fucked up caveats. But then there's also non-Hebrew slaves, which are property. They are passed down from parent to child. They're hereditary. They are property. They're items. They are to be the only rules. It talks about beating them, and, like, you can't beat them so hard that they die within 3 days or something like that. So, like, if you're sitting here trying to say, well, it wasn't quite as awful as American slavery in these specific ways, sure, we can draw some lines there. But at the end of the day, what you are doing is ignoring what the Bible actually says about slavery, splitting hairs between different kinds of slavery to say which one's better, and defending the concept of slavery in literally any way ever, which is always a bad idea.
So first
Okay,
of all, you don't even
I do.
know.
Hold on. Can I clarify something real quick? So I'm reading this section here, and in it, I've got it pulled up right now. I'm reading the NRSVUE edition of it. And what this part is actually talking about, sorry, there is a distinction in Hebrew slaves and like foreign slaves and everything like that. But what this is actually doing is it's actually talking about sort of like an extradition treaty right here in the middle of Deuteronomy. So basically, it's in the preceding passage, you know, we got to take it into context. Everybody loves context. It's talking about the enemies that surround the camp, like the enemies of the Israelites, like the lands around the Israelites. And so then it goes into, and it says, you shall not return their owners' slaves who have escaped to you from their owners. So basically it's saying that slaves of other nations that escape into Israel, don't return them to their owners. So this is very specific to foreign slaves that are owned by people in foreign countries that escape into Israel. And so it is not a blatant rule about not returning slaves in general, like slaves that are owned by Israelites. It's very much about slaves that are owned by people that live outside of Israel.
So what passage are you looking at? 23? Because I'm looking at the same thing.
I'm looking at Deuteronomy 23, and then I start in 14 and read through to 15.
Okay. Give me.
I can just go ahead and read it for everybody. So in 14, it says, because the Lord your God, hold on, I'm reading it for people. Because the Lord your God travels along with your camp to save you and to hand over your enemies to you. Therefore, your camp must be holy, so that he may not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. You shall not return their owners' slaves who have escaped to you from their owners. So the there is talking about the enemies, when he says to save you and hand you over to your enemies up there, your camp must be holy. He's talking about their owners, meaning the enemies of God's people. Just like Captain America, I can do this all day.
So
I have other quotes I was going to read whenever we got there.
I'm not actually defending the idea of slavery. I believe that we live in an imperfect world. And what I'm saying is that this was the law of Moses, not God's law, but the law of Moses' attempt to manage.
Did God command these things?
Due to the hardness of their hearts.
Did God command? That's a great question. Yeah. Did God command slavery?
No, he actually never did. In fact, Jesus.
Yes, he did.
If you can turn in Leviticus 25, 44 through 46,
Seriously.
if you could just real quick.
Read your Bible, dude. I've got it open right here. That was going to be my next question after you were done, John. Yeah, Leviticus 25:44. It clearly says, "You shall from the heathen that are around you, you shall buy them as men and women." Moreover, I hate the language in this fucking thing. It's a King James version. Let me read it off of this thing. "Your males and female slaves are to come from the nations around you, and from them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you, and members of their class born in your country. They will become your property. You can will them to your children as inherited property and make them slaves for life." That's Leviticus 25, and that is God speaking. God says, take slaves from the heathens among you and from the temporary residents of other countries living around you. They are your property to be passed down to your children. That's what God said.
And two things to that. Again, broken world needs God's peace. It is an imperfect.
Oh, for fuck's
sake. So God isn't all powerful. Like seriously, right. if you read through the Old Testament, God perfectly describes how to encrust the Ark of the Covenant with gems and jewels. He tells them exactly like you could blueprint this shit out from the Old Testament, how to build a tabernacle, how to build a temple, exactly how to line the innards of the temple with gold and all this other stuff. He gives them painstaking. He says, don't eat shellfish. Right? Like he does all these things in the Old Testament. Yeah, several fucking times. In the Old Testament, he says these things, but he can't say don't own another person as property. Like he can't put that in one of the 4 Ten Commandments of the second version of the 10 Commandments of 3 versions of 10 Commandments, that he spends the first 4 mentally masturbating, like in the first 4. He can't make one of those. Don't own another person as a slave. That's really weird. Don't do that. It's bad. Like he can't do that, as well as some other commandments that I could give. But you're telling me, you're seriously sitting here arguing to me that he can mandate all of these things to right down to the amount of gems that encrust the Ark of the Covenant, but yet he can't tell his people not to own another person as property.
It's nutty, dude.
Again, I wasn't done telling you what I was going to tell you. And first of all, y'all are atheists. There's no foundation for your worldview. You acting like
oh my god! Let's not pivot.
No, it's great.
Pivot.
Stay on topic. Don't try to jump to something else you're comfortable with. You're the one calling in, defending a God that said it's not only good, but how to own people. You're defending a God that told people how to keep slaves, where to get them, how to beat them. And you're going to pivot to some other dumb shit? No, we're going to talk about this. Why is it acceptable for you to worship a God that says slavery is good and tells how to do it?
The whole time. You're misrepresenting exactly what I believe. You're putting words into my mouth. You're acting like I hold positions that I don't.
Then let me explain it. Then explain it. Why are you defending slavery?
I'm not defending slavery. I never said that.
What are you defending?
I'm explaining what it was.
Okay. Look.
What's the point?
You said, right. What you said was that God gave a law to a group of people whose hearts were hardened, meaning that he couldn't change their hearts, which means that he's not all powerful. But yet their hearts weren't hardened so much that they couldn't be told exactly how many crystals to put on the Ark of the Covenant. But yet their hearts were hardened just enough to be like, hey, don't own slaves. Like that's something that God couldn't do.
That's an issue.
Yeah, that's the part that we're confused on. We're confused as to your theology on why God is limited in this aspect. Why is God limited to, telling people how many crystals to put on the ark, but yet he can't tell them not to own another person as slave, as property, sorry.
He actually, hold on a second. are you going to let me finish my point? Because you keep cutting me off when I'm in mid-sentence.
Are you going to make a point, or are you just going to pivot to some other bullshit argument?
Yeah.
Here's where I'll start then. In terms of owning people as slaves, they were actually told to treat them as if they were a hired hand. And first of all, I would like to point.
And immediately, Andrew, I have to interrupt you again. See, I want to let you speak. I really do. I want to let you finish what you're saying. But when you immediately open with shit like that, we have to cut in to point out what exactly, in what world do you treat a hired hand like property? In what world do you pass on a hired hand to your children as an item, as an object? When is that okay?
Let me address the heart and heart part. First of all, God does.
Nope, I would like you to answer my question first.
You're throwing a lot of different things for me to address, though. I got to do it one at a time.
I'm asking you this one question based on what you just said, and then I will let you continue. You started by saying that the Bible said that we should treat slaves like hired hands. I'm asking you, whenever would you treat a hired hand like the slaves of the Bible, beating them, passing them on to your children as property? When is that acceptable?
There's an incentive. First of all, again, you're making certain claims that are not validified, because if you go down further in Exodus, if you do injure a slave, there's a strong incentive not to hurt your slave.
I'm going to ask you again. In Leviticus, God himself says where to get slaves, how to beat slaves, and that you can pass them down to your children as property. You made the claim that the Bible also says that slaves should be treated like hired help. I'm asking you to square that circle. When do you beat hired help? When do you pass hired help down as property? Then you can move on to your next dumb talking point.
Guys, you have to use the Bible collectively. It's not a dictionary. It's a story.
I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you, is there ever a time when you can pass a hired hand down to your children as property? Is there ever a time?
In those days, I think you could if you married into it and you wanted to stick with your
Okay, well, then we have a vastly different understanding of what hired help are for and how they are to be treated. Move on to your next thing now. We'll come back to it.
Okay, so and thank you for letting me talk a little longer. I appreciate it. The hardness of the heart's part. With free will, you can't just force people to do things. So over time, God.
And immediately we have another problem. Andrew, in the book of Exodus, the Pharaoh wants to let the Hebrew slaves go. Over and over, he expresses that he wants to let them go. And God hardens his heart so that he will not let them go. It's one of the many examples of when God violates people's free will in the Bible in order to serve his own purposes. God wants to do a bunch of plagues. God wants to kill a bunch of babies. So God hardens the Pharaoh's heart over and over and makes him keep the slaves against his own will. So God is clearly willing to violate free will. Why doesn't he do it here?
So in terms of Pharaoh's hardness of heart, Pharaoh already made his decision a long time ago. God was honestly just
no. I'm sorry. No.
Nope.
It specifically says in Exodus, and I can read it out loud here. I can definitely.
I was pulling it up as yeah.
Yeah. It definitely says that God hardened his heart, as if God actively did something to prevent Pharaoh from releasing the Hebrew Israelites, from their bondage. A bondage, by the way, that they entered into like willingly and everything. But in any case, God in the Bible, it definitely says that God directly does something to the Pharaoh in order to harden his heart. I think that it's because God really wanted to kill all the firstborn sons of Egypt. Like he really had a big thing for like killing children at that point for whatever reason. And so he was like, I'm going to kill all of them. So I'm going to create a situation to where I can do that because Pharaoh is not going to let my people go and everything like that. So Basically, God orchestrates this entire situation so that he can kill a bunch of children. But it all starts with hardening Pharaoh's heart. It directly says that he does that.
It's like over and over. I've got just the first one I opened to was here in Exodus 10, verse 20. It's talking about, it says, but God hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the children of Israel go. And that's not the first, second, or third time it uses that exact language. Here it's in chapter 7, a couple of chapters back. God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders against the land of Egypt. He literally says he's going to do it, and then he does it.
Evidence is a fucking bitch, isn't it?
Pharaoh's position and where he wanted to stand was already solidified. God simply just let his heart actually made it harder because he wanted to get back at Egypt. Essentially, all the plagues actually could draw back, I believe, to the different gods of Egypt, and it was honestly to shame Pharaoh where he was at.
So just to be clear, from what you're saying here, God already knew that the Pharaoh wasn't going to let the children go because his heart was already hardened. So him hardening his heart over and over again throughout the story is irrelevant. It doesn't matter that he continued to harden his heart because his heart was already hard. However the fuck, that's just atherosclerosis, but whatever. Like, the point is, the end goal here was to torment a bunch of innocent people in order to shame their king. That's God's plan. Because the people of Egypt that suffered from the plagues and then had their children killed, they didn't make the policy. They didn't have the rule of law. They didn't make the laws. They didn't do any of that. They were just people. So God so desperately wanted to embarrass one dude that he tortured thousands of innocent people and killed thousands of innocent children and violated a man's free will just so he could do that. And that's why slavery's good.
He didn't violate free will, though. That's not correct. But in terms of that word innocent, you can't just hand that around. No one's innocent, not even me. We all need redemption, first of all. And Egypt back then is not Western society. So you're attaching assumptions to this that don't apply to the time period.
Does that
make sense?
What? No, it doesn't. We're talking about killing the firstborn children of every family. What did those babies do to deserve to die because their pharaoh did some stuff?
They killed the firstborns of the Israelites. And so, like I was saying, God was redeeming his people. So the firstborn Egyptian babies, they were the ones that killed all the Israelites? Not the babies specifically, but Egypt themselves. And
okay. So let me propose this.
The Egyptians did some bad things, so the babies of the Egyptians are the ones that need to be killed.
So not all of them would have been babies.
And therefore, and again, just to remind everybody what we're talking about here, and therefore these babies died, and so therefore biblical slavery is okay.
So let me get this straight. You would have no problem with if the United States or any other country had a problem with another country and they went in and they actively killed all of the firstborn children, non-combatants, by the way, which is a war crime. Right. Mm-hmm. All the firstborn children, they killed all the firstborn children just because of what some assholes in the government did. Would you say that is justified, or is this another special pleading argument?
Well, I wouldn't say that in that particular example, but after all,
it's special pleading.
God who can do whatever he wants, who decides how the universe runs.
Okay.
Special
pleading. There it is.
Certainly can.
It took us a long time to get there, Andrew, but we finally got to you being honest. God can do whatever he wants. He runs the universe. So it doesn't matter. This 27 minutes into this conversation, we finally get there. It doesn't matter about slavery. It doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what we point to in the Bible, because in your arguments, trying to defend the Bible by saying, well, you can't just read one passage. You have to read the whole thing. You have to read this passage. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, at least now you're finally honest. You are okay with the Bible slavery stuff because God said it and God can do whatever he wants. Period. It doesn't matter what the Bible actually says. Doesn't matter what slavery actually is. Doesn't matter who's suffering when. Doesn't matter how many babies are dying. God did a thing, and that's fine because God did the thing. And I don't care because God did it, and God's allowed to do whatever. That's your actual argument. That's your answer.
No, hold on a second. You've been dishonest, and you've been framing my arguments on what I believe. I'm not a fan of slavery, and neither would God ultimately. He's trying to recover the world.
If God's not a fan of slavery, ultimately, why would he ever utter anything? Okay, so you're not a fan of slavery. Let's say that you're king of whatever fucking country. Would you ever tell your people, hey, you can go and purchase slaves from the nations around you? You can purchase them. You can pass them down as property within your own family. Would you ever, as a person, go and tell a group of people that they can do that?
No, first of all, we have credit.
Right. That means that you're more moral than your own God.
The same thing as
the God that you believe in, the God that you get on your knees for every single Sunday. You are better than that sick, sadistic motherfucker.
Hold on 1 second. You're not letting me finish.
You're not listening to me.
And the time and just shortening it down to one time period. I'm talking about a progressive recovery of humanity.
So God is constrained by time? Is God constrained by time?
Hold on. No, he's not constrained by time, but what I'm saying is...
Okay, then it shouldn't fucking matter. It should not fucking matter in the least bit whether or not he's speaking to the Israelites in the 2nd century BCE or if he's talking to us now. It should not matter if he's not constrained by time. His absolute moral foundation should apply all throughout history, but it fucking doesn't. And you know why? That's because God was created by men to push man's own agenda using some supernatural dickhead in order to push it. That's it.
Well, you guys are not letting me finish again. Because I was actually about to say...
Because you keep saying dumb shit every single sentence you utter. That's why.
You do too, though. you talk about God.
What have I said? Forrest, what have I said? What have I said that's been dumb so far?
I want to ask Andrew, like, what have we said that's been wrong? We've quoted the Bible to you, and we've talked about what God actually said. And all you have done this whole call is justify evil. And saying, well, it's not really that, and it's not really that, and it's not really this, and you have to take it this way and that way. When at the end of the day, the point, our thesis statement here at the ACA is that there is no good slavery. Slavery is wrong all the time, and all the time slavery is wrong. And you're sitting here saying, well, God couldn't have told them not to own slaves because it was the times and the this and the that. Meanwhile, God can give clear instructions on how to cut your hair, on how to trim your beard, on what fabrics to wear, on what food to eat, on what animals to touch, on who to have sex with. He can give all of these very clear instructions, structuring society in the way that he wants. And then not only does he fail to say, don't own human beings as property, he tells them how and says, go do it. And you're saying that this is just what he has to do. Tell me how we're missing something here.
Well, first of all, you're an atheist, so to call something evil, I mean, you have no foundation for it.
Just be honest and address the question. Just address the question, Andrew.
No, you're borrowing from my foundation. First of all,
don't pivot to something else. Quit being a coward and own up to what your book says. Which is worse, Andrew? Eating shellfish or owning slaves? Which is worse?
So I don't know what you mean by coward, but second of all, to actually answer your question, he did give clear instructions. The law's never changed. In fact, Jesus particularly fulfilled the law through the 10 Commandments, which had nothing to do with slavery.
Andrew, I'm going to have to interrupt you again because you are continuing to pivot to something else rather than addressing the actual point. Which is worse, wearing clothing of mixed fabrics or owning slaves? Which is worse?
Hold on. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Which is worse, wearing clothing of mixed fabrics or owning slaves? Which of those two things is a worse thing to do?
So the problem with that question, though, is that slavery,
I
again,
dare you.
is
I
not the same
dare
slavery
you
that
to
you're...
just answer a direct question. Which is worse, owning a human being as property or wearing a nylon rayon blend?
Again, there's a fundamental problem with your question, though.
I'm going to ask you a different question then. I'm going to ask you a different question then. Which is worse, cutting the sides of your beard or owning slaves? Which is worse, Andrew?
Again, you're framing the question wrong. Slavery in the Bible.
Oh my God. Hold on. Let me try. Which is worse, eating shrimp or owning a person as property? Which one is worse?
Wait, did you say getting shrimp? What?
I said shrimp. Eating shrimp.
Eating shrimp. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I heard that wrong. Again, I'm not for slavery, so I would obviously say that.
No one is saying you're for slavery, Andrew. No one is saying you're for slavery. What I'm saying is that you're behaving cowardly and that you can't answer a direct question that contradicts your worldview. Which is worse, I'm not, owning slaves or eating shrimp?
I would say having to own a slave would be worse, of course. But again, you're framing.
So ignoring the bullshit way you worded that, then why is it that God found the time to tell people not to eat shrimp, but not use human beings as farming equipment? Why was it a bigger priority for your God to condemn eating shrimp than it was for him to not tell people how to own slaves? Because again, he didn't just fail to condemn it, he directly condoned it.
No, it's managed. It's managed debt. It's managed debt.
Do you think?
Some people sold.
Do you think, Andrew?
Dude, let me finish, dude.
Andrew, you called into our show and you're saying evil, horrible shit, and I'm just trying to get you to be honest for 1 fucking second and just answer a direct question. I'll show you. I'll demonstrate for you. Okay, I'll show you what we want so there's no confusion. Hey, John. Which one is worse? Is it owning slaves or is it touching the skin of a dead pig?
Definitely owning slaves. Don't even have to think about it.
If you were to tell somebody what not to do and you only had the chance to tell them one thing, would you rather tell them to not own slaves or would you rather tell them to not touch the skin of a dead pig?
Definitely tell them to not own slaves.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Is there ever any situation ever where owning slaves is in any way even remotely acceptable?
Not at all.
Okay, if there was slavery in your society, John, and you were in charge of it, would you rather manage it or abolish it?
I would definitely say, hey, we shouldn't be fucking doing this. Let's stop.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And last question: if you were like actually in control of everything, and you knew slavery was a possibility, do you think that it would be justifiable for you to then like tell people to do slavery? Do you think that telling people do slavery might confuse them in some way? Is that something you'd ever want in any world?
I would never command anybody to own another person as property.
Definitely. See how easy that is, Andrew? Slavery is worse than eating shellfish, and slavery is worse than touching the skin of a dead pig, and slavery is worse than cutting the size of your beard. Slavery is bad. And your God didn't just not say that slavery is bad. God said, here's how to do slavery. And you're sitting here saying, well, he was managing it. He could have abolished it. He could have just said, don't own slaves. He had 10 commandments. Like John pointed to a little while earlier, like a bunch of them were just jacking himself off. He could have made one of those commandments, don't own slaves, but he didn't. In fact, he did the opposite and said, I command you to take slaves this way. Your God is a monster. It's a good thing he doesn't exist.
So let me ask you this, though. Why did they sell themselves into slavery? Because that's actually...
And now we've gotten into the bullshit,
it was more
right nonsense. You're going to have to actually answer a question someday in your life, Andrew, and I hope it's an easier one than this, because frankly, it's sad that you can keep running up into this really, really, it shouldn't be a moral conundrum. This should be a very easy one for you. Slavery's bad. Yeah, the Bible says some shit about slavery. It must have meant something different. There must be some other thing that this is a mistranslation. This is a misinterpretation. God would never do this. You can't even be that level of dishonest. You have to go all the way down to the fucking dregs and say, no. This was the way God had to do it. God was good. God did it this way on purpose because God can do whatever he wants. You should be ashamed of what you've been defending here, Andrew.
You're dishonest with my positions, but I understand you probably need another caller. I appreciate you letting me come on.
Let me ask you one more question, Andrew. Let's see if you can fucking answer it. Does anything God ever do ever bad?
If he's the rule maker, then whatever rule he makes is his rule.
That's not the correct answer.
So is everything that God commands good? Because he's the rule maker?
It is good according to his purposes, but just like that previous caller, I might not understand everything, but yes, his rules are his rules, not yours.
Do you trust God? Do you trust God to be good even if you don't understand it?
Well, he healed me when I had a stomach issue. The doctors couldn't understand how I was healed.
Would love it if you could just answer a question. You do trust him. Great. So then, because everything God is good, because everything God commands is good, and you trust it to be good, even if you don't understand it, you trust that God's command is good. God commanded slavery. So therefore, yes, you have been defending slavery. You have been justifying it this whole time. Despite your constant protestations, we have not been taking you out of context. We have not been putting words in your mouth. We have not been misrepresenting your point. You called here to defend slavery and to defend the God that commanded it. That is evil, Andrew, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And with that, we will now move on to another call. Good gravy, y'all.
Damn.
Should not be that hard.
Honestly, I've never heard anybody have such a tougher time condemning the actions of a supposed being as that. Like, whenever the slavery really conversation comes up, they always have the toughest time being like, yeah, that was kind of shitty.
Yeah, seriously. Or at least, like, I even tried to give him outs. Like, at least have the fucking moral compass to say the Bible's wrong here. Something bad happened. It was mistranslated. This was taken out of context. It isn't that way. Something. Or it doesn't mean slave. It means servant. It means something else. It's something to get away from the fact that this is just fucking slavery. And no, this is definitely slavery. It's a different kind, but it's still slavery. But hey, God said it, and it's great. And I have no way of telling whether that's worse or better than eating fucking shrimp. I don't know. The question's ill-formed. It's, dude, like, how fucking scared do you have to be? It's frustrating. We've got a bunch more super chats, and I've got a couple more announcements, so we'll do those really quick. Announcement here is if you like what we're doing, you can maybe consider supporting us on Patreon. Giving to our Patreon ensures our ability to continue to produce fine quality content like you're seeing today. Visit tiny.cc/PatreonAXP to check that out. Also, we got some super chats down here. Ben Jones sent in $10. Divine Hiddence is the #1 issue for Christianity that I've heard no good answers. If Christians today were born in 1025 as an Aztec, they would all be on their knees worshiping this Aztec god. Yeah, that's one thing that we've talked about a few times on shows like this. Like, if you were born in a different time, a different place, aren't you very lucky that you happen to be born just in the right way, to the right family, in the right country, in the right part of the right country, to get the right version of the right translation of the right religion. Kelly Laughlin sent in $2. All the cool kids come to the Discord after show. That's why I won't be there, because I'm not cool enough.
Sorry, not to say that you're not cool there, Forrest, but I will be in the after show just in case anybody wants to join up.
Hell yeah. We've also got Renaissance sent 10 ass dollars. Do you ever feel internalized pettiness towards science deniers? Like, let me take your phone, your medicine, your sanitation, etc., and I'll give it back once you think about what you've done. It is hard, especially when people like call into shows like this to tell us that, you know, the age of the earth isn't what it is, or that evolution isn't what it is, or that the radiometric dating doesn't work, any of these other things. Like, dude, the physics that you are condemning is the reason why you're able to call us and voice your stupid opinion.
Yeah, I love this statement. I don't believe in science. Like, and they're using a cell phone in order to call it, like call in and like do it. Like whether, regardless of where it is, you're still using technology in order to communicate your message. Like, what do you mean?
It's so frustrating. Also, before I move on really quickly, just want to throw out there that Roll for Initiative has raised over $20,000 for Doctors Without Borders, and you should be a part of that if you want. And now we've got Dre, pronouns he, him, calling in from Aluminum Lobsters, or maybe Alabama. I'm trying to understand the atheist position better while also expressing my position as a theist. This could be a really productive conversation. Dre, you're on the AXPs. How are you doing?
Hold on. I gotta test you, Dre. Roll Tide.
Oh, for sure. You know.
Nice.
The correct answer is Roll Tide, but okay, let's go.
That's fine.
Well, first I want to thank you guys for having me. This is definitely a pleasure. So
thank you, Dre.
I've learned a lot about atheists. I once was almost an atheist. I grew up in a Christian church, and I learned a lot about the Christian church and the Christian theology. And I disagree with a lot of the teachings from Christian theology, but I also disagree with a lot of the teachings from philosophy as well. But first, I want to understand why are you guys atheists?
Yeah, it's simply that we don't have a good reason to believe in a God. We haven't been given anything. By the way, the bottom of the screen here says hi him instead of he him, but that's just a typo. But yeah, it was just simply we don't have a good reason to believe in a God. We don't have any evidence for anything supernatural like that. The evidence that's been offered to us is woefully lacking. It's just not really compelling. It wouldn't be compelling for anything else ever. The kind of evidence that people give me for a God are things like visions and feelings and like these weird little logical conundrums that aren't really conundrums, and that wouldn't work in any other way, especially for such a big claim as you know, some supernatural divine creator of a whole universe. That's a very big thing that you should want a lot of evidence for. And finally, two other things, I guess. Number two, I don't have a use for a God. So like, I'm not really interested in one. I'm not looking for one. Even if you could demonstrate that one was real, I wouldn't really want to hang around with it. And then finally, I have no desire for a God. Again, if you could show me that one is real, I don't want anything to do with it. Any God that would run a universe like this is clearly insane. So I'm not willing to participate in that God's reality in that way. So yeah, the biggest and most important thing is just that we don't have a good reason to believe. No one's given us a compelling argument for it. And all the arguments so far have done the opposite of convince us. They've driven us further away.
Yeah, and just to add mine on here, like I just don't see the evidence that warrants the belief. That's why I remain agnostic atheist. As far as the general God idea goes, I remain agnostic. Like I just simply don't know whether or not one exists. But for specific definitions, I remain like a hard atheist, which would mean that I actively disbelieve that those gods exist. So, and that's because like I take the Bible or the Quran or any of those things to be sort of like requirements manuals or requirements statements for those particular definitions of God, and because those don't comport with what we see in reality, that means that they just simply cannot exist as described in those holy books. So I actively don't believe in those, but I remain agnostic on a general concept of a God.
Okay. So what I like to do is I like to get back to the root of anything. Do you guys look at history and logic and consistency
and apply that to your perspective, your worldview?
Yeah.
I want to say yes, but I want to make sure I'm understanding what you mean when you say like look at history and logic. Like, do you mean that like we have like a historical context for stuff and that matters to us, or like I don't go back and check history to make sure that I know like if the lights are on in the room. I want to understand what you mean by that. And I'm sorry if that's a stupid question, but sometimes people give us weird little gotchas. So could you explain what you mean?
All right, so an example would be like, okay, I'm a Muslim, I believe the Quran, but historically, why should I even believe in a God? If there's something that people even done.
Well, hold on. If I can interrupt, how about let's not posit about a Muslim, like this fictitious Muslim. Why don't you tell us why you believe in your particular version of God?
Okay, first off, I believe in the Bible, 100%, everything in it true. And the conversations prior to mine were, pretty good, pretty decent. I could probably answer those questions you guys have better than those guys before me. But one thing I do notice is that the general public, which mostly every Christian has the wrong understanding of the scriptures, and the main perspective is not the true perspective of the scriptures. So the reason I believe in the scriptures is because, I can see consistency in history and logic, that there's no other truth to it.
Okay. If I can interrupt, what piece of history comports with what the Bible says?
A lot of it, actually. So we go into peeling back the layers, like I said before, going back to the roots. We see lies. We see lies, and we see the Bible being attacked. That right there speaks.
This is not history. Tell me what historical event in the Bible it has been proven to be an actual historical event, like in history.
Well, we got the mount that Moses, the Mount Sinai, is still burnt. That was a historical event in the Bible. It's still burnt to this day.
Is it?
And
no,
can't tell you why.
No, they can, but that's not true.
So, John, if you want to,
yeah,
I have.
Yeah, John, do you want to dig into that a little bit, because I have a totally different question. I don't want to derail you.
Right. So the whole the Mount Sinai being burnt thing, this comes from I don't think it's Ron Wyatt, but it's like a Ron Wyatt specific like type of person. The claim is that Iran basically allowed recently people to come in and photograph the top of Mount Sinai, and the top of Mount Sinai is still burnt. But what they're not telling you, whoever this is that is actually naturally explained just by the minerals and everything that's there, and how that mountain formed and everything like that. Like, it's all naturally explained. So it's not like God's hellfire that is still burnt the top of the mountain. It's just a natural explanation for why the top of the mountains look like that. So that's not actually proof of God. And the fact that we can explain that with natural processes means that a supernatural God wizard guy is ruled out. So you're going to need to come up with a better historical event than that.
Technically, it doesn't rule out, simply because you're talking about a spiritual essence manifesting in the physical world. Therefore,
which is magic.
Apply physical texture. It's not magic.
You're basically saying that magic trumps reality, and that's just simply not how anything works. Like, we know how like oxidization works. We also know how rocks become different colors, and how different minerals can be worked into the rocks, and how that can change the colors and the appearance of the rocks, and all that kind of stuff. The area that particular mountain is contained in has very reasonable reasons as to why it is black on top, and it's due to the mineral composition of that area. So I mean, you're telling me that a magical wizard in the sky is a more likely conclusion than just actual science.
I also want to point out that like this whole time I've been looking for articles on Mount Sinai being burnt to try to glean something from this, and I have found a bunch of things about how Mount Sinai is burned. They're all referring to different mountains, and they're all pointing out like a bunch of them are talking about this one mountain in Saudi Arabia. And then there's a bunch more that are pointing out like that this isn't Mount Sinai, that this isn't what it would have been and where it would have been. And there's a bunch of biblical scholars on here that found like this, you know, the BibleArchaeology.org talking about why this burned looking mountain is not Mount Sinai and doesn't count. And so like even the people who believe in the story, Dre, are disagreeing on which mountain we're even talking about and whether or not the burning is real. So like, I understand this is your belief, and you're saying that every word in the Bible is true. That's its own big bag of problems. But like, this one doesn't really do it for us. You're asking, why are we atheists? This is a great example. You gave some evidence that works for you, and it took us 5 seconds of looking into it to come up with a bunch of better answers. And the thing that I think is really important for you to understand is that even if that didn't happen, even if John and I had no idea how this mountaintop came to looking the way that it did, even if we didn't know, even if we were all pretty sure that that was actually supposed to be Mount Sinai, you're still offering a supernatural example. And the most unhinged, deranged, insane, crazy, over-the-top, multi-billion-dollar international conspiracy theory that exists in the real natural world is inevitably going to be a more reasonable assumption to make than magic. Does that make sense?
All right. I get where you guys are coming from. So you guys don't believe in any spiritual. So you don't believe that we are spiritual beings in a physical body. Y'all don't believe that at all either, huh?
No, and it's for the exact same reason. I don't have any evidence of a spirit or a soul or anything like that. I don't even know what that actually means, to be honest with you, because everybody tries to tell me something different. So no, I don't.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from any spiritual manifestation, since you guys don't believe. So if you don't even believe that you're a spiritual being or the spiritual realm or anything like that, we couldn't even have that conversation because you guys don't even have a basis of that ground. So I'll keep it, you feel me, all what we can see and observe.
Yeah.
All right. So
Dre, before you do, I just want to thank you for that, because that is incredibly fucking cool of you. I can't tell you how many times we get in a conversation like this and people cannot get off that ground and they cannot find common ground to have a conversation with. So that is incredibly cool of you to switch gears like that. Thank you very much.
No problem, man. No problem. All right. So we have the crucifixion. Let's go there. All right.
Okay.
In the crucifixion.
Yeah, sure.
In the Bible, it says that the sky went black when Christ died. Well, we have reports in Chinese saying that same thing on that same day at that same time. So what's your argument with that?
Are you talking about the eclipse?
They said it was an eclipse, but it wasn't an eclipse. The sky was black worldwide.
Okay.
No.
So
America when it's going on in Africa.
So let's I'm going to address that with you. Actually, you know what? I was going to give you something totally different, but I want to give you the respect you've just given me. Let's double check. I'm just going to Google right here, sky dark during crucifixion, because I think I know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure. Okay, so here's from Princeton. This is iconography and blah, 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 darkness spread over the land. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see if this gives us any details of what might be going on here. Here's a bunch of manuscripts. John, do you have something specific that you have like prepared on this? Because I think I know what Dre is talking about, but I want to double check on one thing that I think was happening.
Right. So I don't know of any Japanese, reports of like a worldwide thing. Sorry, what was that, Forrest?
He said Chinese.
Oh, Chinese. Sorry, Chinese. So outside of all that, I don't know of any reports of it, and I've researched like the evidence for the crucifixion quite extensively, and really the only evidence that we have is the earliest evidence that we have is Paul saying that Jesus was crucified, but he doesn't really give us a good indication as to where this actually occurred, when it occurred, or anything like that. So we don't actually have any kind of good evidence to even say that Jesus, like a historical person named Jesus, was crucified by the Roman government at the behest of the Jewish Sanhedrin or the Jewish community in that area. But as far as the eclipse goes, that is a later invention in the Gospels. They invented this, and you even have sometimes people referring to either Phlegon or Thales as reporting that these things happen, but those are actually specifically stating that it doesn't make sense for these things to happen. And they also don't locate this supposed eclipse or this darkening of the sky to be anywhere near Judea. And we can also look at, the predictions of solar eclipses. NASA has some pretty good data on this, and there's no actual eclipses or anything like that occurred to go over the particular area of Judea when Jesus was supposedly crucified in either 30 or 33. So, I mean, there's just literally no evidence whatsoever for any of this stuff that you're saying, with the vague description that you've given here as far as the Chinese evidence for a worldwide darkness. Even if there was one that claimed to have some kind of worldwide darkness in it, we should be seeing reports from all over the world about a worldwide darkness at that particular time, and we just simply don't see that. So, I mean, you would have to have insanely good evidence, for this, and I just don't see that as existing.
Yeah, I have a couple of issues with it because I'll be honest with you, Dre, I haven't found anything. I've been Googling over here just to kind of like double check and see if I can find any of these, contemporary reports that you're talking about. I haven't found one. I found a couple of things about like some, Roman or Greek historians that wrote some stuff, but like that doesn't really do much for me because we have a few times where we're like, people would take the Bible and assume that it was history and then write it in a historical account using the Bible as a source rather than actually having any kind of eyewitness testimony. So like, I don't think, I don't have any reason to believe that. However, let's, play with it for a second. Let's assume that this did happen and that we have several cultures that mentioned that there was actually the skies going dark at this time. First question is, does that actually equate to a supernatural event? We have cultures all over the world that talk about dragons. Do we need to sit here and now believe that dragons are real? Probably not. We also can say that, lots of other cultures have flood stories. But we also see that links back to natural things. The flood stories don't sync up. Doesn't mean that there's a global flood. It usually has to do with them living near a water source like a river or something like that. So like that, there's usually a naturalistic explanation rather than a supernatural explanation. And finally, third and most importantly, even if we didn't know and we just knew for sure that a bunch of people all over the world wrote down that the sky went dark at this time, that doesn't necessarily mean that there was a magical reason for that. That alone would require evidence. And well, I should say it this way. I'm sorry, I don't mean to backtrack what I'm saying, but like, even if we could say that there was a way that we knew that the whole sky went dark that we couldn't explain, that isn't then backing up evidence of Christ's divinity. It isn't evidence for Christ walking on water. It isn't evidence for Christ curing a leper. It isn't evidence for the existence of God. Each of those things are different claims that need their own evidence. And so even if I were to grant you that the sky went dark on this time, that doesn't tell me much. So to recap, because I know I just rambled a lot and I want to give you the fair shake of being able to address what I'm saying. I can't find anything that backs up what you're saying. Even if I could, and even if that was true, shit happens and people report it around the world, like dragons, for example. That doesn't mean you should believe it. And even if we could for sure say that the sky did go dark, that doesn't mean that it's supernatural, and that doesn't do anything for the rest of the divinity story. Those are my three contentions. We've been talking for a long time. Dre, what do you think about all that?
All right. So first off, which is why I asked you the question I asked you in the beginning before I even started to speak, which you have to take history and logic and consistency to apply to your worldview. Which at this point it seems like you don't. It seems like if you see or hear something that doesn't equate to your worldview, you just dismiss it. Even if
no. Hold on. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, in all fairness, what I just demonstrated was logic and consistency. I didn't say I wouldn't believe this no matter what. I said I can't find any evidence for what you're saying, but assuming that it's true, assuming that this did happen, there are other explanations, and I don't have evidence in any direction, so it doesn't make any sense for me to accept the most fantastical explanation that goes against the rules of logic, like Occam's razor, for example, that goes against logic to do that. And even if it was something that was supernatural, that doesn't back up any other supernatural claims. So what I'm demonstrating here is logic and consistency, sir.
I got you. So I like to keep things very, very simple, man. I'm a smart guy, but conversation is very easy. More smooth when things are simplified. Just my way of doing things. So let's stick to the black sky thing just for a second. So what I mean when I say consistency, history, and logic. All right. So logically, we got the 3 laws of logic. The law of excluded middle. Logically, it's either true or false that the sky went black at this proclaimed time.
Sure.
Historically, we see this throughout multiple cultures claiming this around the same time. Consistently, we see this. We see this happening, and it's consistent with the scriptures. So therefore, we have to consider this to be true.
So
it's more like
so based on what you just said, again, I'm going to ignore whether or not this actually happened. Okay, because I can't find anything about it. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that this is real. Okay, we'll grant the premise. Does it make sense then to say this is an historical event that I don't have any other explanation for? And I have a lot of cultures saying this event definitely happened. So we're all going to agree the event happened. You don't have an explanation for it. Therefore, it must be magic. Because you can look at any number. There's video games that came out. Like I think Deus Ex is a video game that came out a long time ago. And it talks about the Twin Towers being destroyed in New York, like a decade before it happened. That's prophecy, and therefore the video game is true, and therefore there are these cyborg people running around. That doesn't make any sense, right? New York is a real place, and the Spider-Man comics talk about New York. Therefore, the Spider-Man comics are true. That doesn't make any sense, right? So even if I grant you, yes, the sky went dark at this time, and multiple cultures all corroborate on this, something happened that made the sky go dark. That doesn't mean that it was a supernatural event. And even if it was one supernatural event, that doesn't justify belief in any other supernatural events. Every single one of these claims needs its own evidence. So for you to say, I believe the whole Bible because I have a couple cultures that mention that there was a dark sky at one time, that doesn't follow the rules of logic at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. That would be illogical to take one event that may be evidence for, to prove something and just take that event and run with it and say, oh, yeah, all of it's true. That would be illogical to do completely. I completely agree. I completely agree. So let's just say,
so then if we can agree on that, can we also go back and agree that assuming it's a supernatural event is also illogical? Because that's my contention, even if I agreed with you that this happened, no, you don't think that that's illogical?
No, it's not illogical to say something is supernatural. That's not illogical at all. Why it's not illogical is not because of evidence of supernatural, but it's not illogical because the only reason you're saying that is because you don't have an explanation, but you still don't believe that you believe that everything is materialized. So if you only believe in the physical realm, then it's only logical to you because of your perspective, but that's not logic. Logic don't work off your perspective. In your perspective, spiritual things aren't true because you have no evidence of spiritual things. but it's not logical.
I'm so glad that you can presume what we fucking think right now. Like, I'm really shocked whenever a theist comes on here and presumes to know what we think, and you proclaim that we're only denying this because of one reason or another. Like, you don't know what I think. But regardless of that, we've perfectly explained what we think about this. Forrest has painstakingly gone through the logic on this. We've told you what we think, but you feel an inherent need in order to invent a reason. For what reason? Like, to placate yourself, to make yourself feel better about accepting this evidence? Like, it's definitely not an us thing. It's definitely a you thing in this particular situation.
No, what I said was, you guys don't believe in spiritual phenomena. You told me that out your own mouth. You don't believe in spiritual beings. You don't believe there's a spiritual realm. You told me that. I'm not assuming that.
But
that's what you said.
But Dre, I also told you why. I also told you why I don't believe in those. It's because I don't have evidence for them. And so it's not that we're just rejecting this claim because it goes against our worldview. We don't have a reason to believe that anything supernatural exists in the first place. So it would be silly for us to then assume that there's a supernatural explanation for something that doesn't work. I can give an example, like just in science in general, right? If I were to prove, like, if I were to say that a thing evolved, for example, like that's what I like. I love evolution. It's my jam. So like, if I'm looking at some bug and I want to say, okay, well, this evolved, I can't just take that just because I want to. I have to first demonstrate that evolution is real, and I have to demonstrate how it works and what it does and all these different things that all play into what I'm now saying about this one individual organism, right? So for you to say, well, we need to accept this supernatural thing, we first have to show that supernatural things exist, and then we need to talk about what they can and can't do and why and all those things before we can then make the claim, well, obviously this thing is supernatural in order or in origin. Do you understand? Like, that's the disconnect. It's not that we just don't want to believe. We already don't believe you, and then you're shoving in this new thing without any new evidence. That's a problem.
No, I never said that. I never said accept supernatural. Remember, I said we're going to stay away from that. I never once said that. What I was saying was, it's not logic to say, because my worldview, spiritual phenomena don't exist. That means if I don't have an explanation, then I have to dismiss it. That's what we were talking about. I never once said accept the supernatural. Never, not once. I said we was going to stay away from that. You asked so the blackness of the sky. You said let's go along. Hypothetically speaking, the sky actually turned black around 31 AD, and we have multiple reports of it. What you said then was, does that make it a supernatural event or something of that sort? You know, and I said, no. You asked, was it logical to say, hey, this still wasn't a supernatural phenomenon because we don't have evidence of supernatural phenomena. I said, no, it's not logical because your worldview says there's no evidence. I mean, there's no such thing as supernatural phenomenon. So therefore, based on your worldview, you're dismissing. That's what I said. You're dismissing you're dismissing.
I think I understand you, Dre, and I'm afraid that we might be talking past each other. So let me try to clarify. It's not my worldview that's the problem here. The problem is evidence. So I don't have evidence of any supernatural thing. And so to then present something and say that it needs to be supernatural, that doesn't make any sense to me because I don't have a reason to assume that there's that anything supernatural. If I don't think that's if I don't have evidence for a supernatural thing in the first place, why would I then attribute? It's as if, like, to say, for example, like there's a magical goblin that lives in my closet, and he is the reason why the sky went black. He has a big magical tarp that he pulled over the whole sky, and that's what happened. You would first need to accept the fact that this goblin exists and that there's such a thing as magical tarps and all that. There's a lot of baggage that comes with that claim. Meanwhile, there are plenty of very natural claims that we have evidence for. Maybe there was a volcano and it cast big clouds over there. Maybe there was a major storm that covered like that whole part of the continent all across Eurasia. And that's why. Maybe there was an eclipse and that's what happened. And the path of the eclipse just happened to go directly from Palestine all the way to China. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe there's some other thing. You know, like there's a million examples of reasons why the sky could have gone dark that don't involve magic and that we know are possible and that we all agree happen sometimes. And what you're doing is instead saying, no. The only thing that can explain this is magic that we've never seen ever, that we're debating, that we're arguing on. You said you were going to get away from the supernatural, but your argument hinges on the supernatural. Do you understand now, like where I'm having an issue?
Yeah, you're definitely misunderstanding me. That wasn't what I was saying. You asked me, was it logical? We're talking about logic. Logic is a topic right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about supernatural or should you accept supernatural. That's not what I'm saying at all. You asked, was it logical? And I said, no, it's not logical to dismiss something based on your worldview. That's all I'm saying.
We're saying we're not doing that. Holy fuck!
Yeah, I'm not dismissing it, Dre.
I was answering the question. I know. I was answering the question. I never said you dismissed anything. I was answering your question, and that's it. It wasn't no other pun intended. I was literally just answering your question. I was just kind of explaining why it wouldn't be logical. Okay. That's all I was doing.
Let's try. Yeah. Let's try one more. Let's try one more. Maybe this is a lost cause. Let's try one more thing. Just like, can you give us a good reason, something that we can all agree on, something that you know, just something that tells us that your God is real, and anything at all?
All right, Jesus Christ.
What about him?
That's not supernatural. He's not supernatural, and he's proven to exist.
Yeah, he is.
You know.
Hold on.
Yeah, he's not supernatural. He's a real person. He's a real person.
Okay.
Wait. First, let's step by step. Do we all agree that there's a man named Jesus Christ that really walked this earth? Is that something we all agree on?
No, but I'm willing to allow it.
No.
I don't. So, yeah, no, I don't agree on that. I don't know for sure. I've heard different, historians and theologians saying different things. I'm not a historian or a theologian, so I don't have the capacity to parse through their ideas. But I'm willing to grant it. Let's for the sake of argument, we'll all agree that Jesus Christ, literally, there was a dude named Jesus who lived around that time. Is that good, John? You good with that?
Okay.
For the purposes of this conversation, yes.
Okay, so we're all going to agree right now, just for the sake of argument, there was a guy named Jesus.
All right. So what you said was evidence that God is real. First, just for hypothetically speaking, there was a man that walked this earth. His name was Jesus. He made some big claims. He confessed to be God. Okay. So if he was real, he claimed to be God, and he turned around and proved it with eyewitness testimony of the resurrection from the dead. Then that alone, you don't need no more evidence. You need no more evidence. It's historically, but we're speaking hypothetically.
So there's an issue.
Historical.
So there's the issue right away, is that there are plenty of people at that time and also today that claim to be God, that claim to be the Son of God, that claim to be magic people, that claim to have supernatural powers. There's plenty of people, both in Jesus's time and even right now. There are people with millions of followers that claim to be gods today. And so just because he claimed it doesn't mean anything. Just because he existed doesn't mean anything. Those are all different claims. Now, you said he proved it. How did he prove it that we can actually all agree on and verify?
Well, first off, let's establish the topic. You asked me for evidence that God exists. I'm not saying the Bible is true. I'm not saying Jesus Christ really lived. What I am saying is historically, it's consistent and logical that if there was a God, and the evidence would be Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ claimed to be God. History backs him up, and the resurrection backs up his claims.
But
that's what I'm.
But
I'm not.
But just a second ago, I just mentioned.
That's evidence.
I just mentioned there are a lot of people who have claimed to be God and have claimed to be different gods and have claimed to be the sons of gods. And there are followers. There's, Satya Sai Baba is one that I bring up all the time. I might be mispronouncing his name. I don't have it in front of me, but this was a guy that lived in India. He died about a decade ago. He had millions of followers who all said that he could walk on water, that he could raise the dead, that he could heal the sick. This was a real dude who lived in our lifetime and claimed to be a god and had millions of people believing in him and saying that they saw with their own eyes that he was doing these miracles. I don't believe in him any more than you do. So what you're telling me is there's this guy named Jesus and he lived a couple thousand years ago and people said he did some cool stuff. Okay, I'll grant all of that. There was a guy named Jesus. He lived 2,000 years ago and people said he did cool stuff. People said he performed miracles. That doesn't convince me of anything any more than the Satya Sai Baba convinces you of anything.
Right, and here's the crazy part. I'm very unbiased. I look at everything from multiple angles. I get all the insight. The guy you're talking about, 9 times out of 10, he may have actually walked on water. He may have raised people from the dead. He may have done things, or he may have had people in place to influence lives for him. I can't say what he did. I wasn't there. You feel me? I've never even heard of the guy, but
right.
I'm not going to completely dismiss that this guy did some cool stuff. I like how you said. I'm not going to completely dismiss the fact that he may have did some cool stuff. So
I get a perspective.
What I am going to say is he did, and there's no eyewitness testimony saying that he rose from the dead. That's what I will say. So
I'm so sorry, Dre. I got to jump in on this. Yeah,
you go first, and I got something.
There are no eyewitness accounts for Jesus whatsoever. The ones that you're referring to are the Gospels. The Gospels are not based on eyewitness accounts. They are fabrications. So the people that wrote the Gospels, they went to pagan schools, and what they did when they went to pagan schools and they were taught how to write in Greek, they were taught to write in Greek by copying previous stories and changing the details a little bit and then making up their own, story. And so that's why we see a lot of things that coincide with like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and all this other stuff and some of the later Gospels and everything like that. But more importantly, the Gospels change so much. Each Gospel is a response to the previous Gospels, or at least an extension of the previous Gospels, or some kind of reworking of the previous Gospels. We don't have any kind of evidence as to what kind of sources informed the Gospels, so we can't even say what sources they pulled from, even if they were eyewitness accounts. The earliest account that we have, sorry, I know I'm going really fast with this, but the earliest accounts that we have about Jesus is actually coming from Paul, and Paul only ever tells us that he got his information from visions and from scripture. So literally the entirety of Christianity is built off of a few people's hallucinations, as well as them reading the scriptures a little bit too closely and reinterpreting things. That's all that's based on. There's nothing to suggest that Jesus did any of the magical shit that he is said to have done. Not even Paul reports magical shit other than appearing as a vision to Paul. And then I'll let Forrest talk now.
Yeah, I would throw in there that, like, even if we're going to talk about the supposedly eyewitness testimonies of the resurrection, all of those are from the Bible. And even those in the Bible are terribly inconsistent. So, like, if you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John across these Gospels, they all give completely different stories. One of them says that when the people got to the tomb, the stone was already moved. Another one says that there was an earthquake and then the stone moved. Somebody says that there was an angel sitting on top of the stone. Another person says that the angels appeared behind the people when they got to the stone. Other one says there were no angels there whatsoever. Some of them say the angels were inside of the tomb. Some say they're outside of the tomb. Was it 2 angels? Was it 3 angels? Was it 1 angel? They say the body of Jesus was in the tomb and then it ascended in front of them. Others say that it was already gone when they got there. Some of them say that a group of women saw it and came back and reported to everybody else and that they weren't actually there to see it and it was just secondhand. Like, even just in the Bible, the stories are completely inconsistent, and that's largely because of what John just explained. And so, like, the eyewitness testimony you're talking about isn't reliable. And what I want you to understand, Dre, is that, like, if I were to give you any other thing, if I were to talk to you about, like, the Easter Bunny. And I said, yeah, but I've got a 2,000-year-old book which has 5 different stories about the Easter Bunny that are inconsistent with one another and that don't line up with one another, and therefore you should believe in it. You wouldn't. There's no, I respect you enough to say that you would not believe anything if I gave you the evidence that you're giving me for Jesus.
All right, so I'm glad y'all went there. Because I went here myself.
Too.
All right, so just to confirm what you're talking about, I was reading over the Gospels, and I noticed, like, it was the part where it was talking about Peter was going to deny Christ 3 times. On each account, the scenario was different. In one account, Peter was walking, and a woman was following him. And one account, a woman kept meeting up with him. She wasn't following him, but he kept bumping into somebody else. And the woman just happened to be there or something like that. And on another account, there was no woman. So I get what you're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. But if we have to take into consideration that these are different accounts from different people. If we both see a car wreck right now, we're going to not have the same exact story on what happened. Can we agree on that?
Correct. Yes, you are absolutely right, which is why eyewitness testimony is like the worst form of evidence. We have cross-examiner here who's a lawyer, and he's back in the. Am I right in saying that is like the worst? He's giving me a big thumbs up. Yes. So we have a lawyer here in the chat room with us that's pointing out that, like, yes, eyewitness testimony is the worst form of evidence for that reason. It kind of blows that that's the only thing you're giving us here as far as like believing that Jesus resurrected, because we have only bad eyewitness testimony from one book that is heavily biased. I want to add in here. So the Gospels are written in a very specific fashion. So the Gospels, Mark written most likely either right at 70 CE, just after or just before. And then Matthew was written and basically has access to Mark, does have access to Mark. And so he takes Mark's Gospel, changes it a little bit, adds a few things to it that he wants to add to it and everything like that. And then what you have is Luke coming in about the 90s. Some scholars place him in the 2nd century, maybe, but around the 90s or so, you've got Luke that comes in, takes both Matthew and Mark, and then combines them and uses some from one or the other, disagrees with Matthew on some things, disagrees with Mark on some things, creates his own narrative, adds to it and everything like that. And so then we've got John, who has access to all 3 of them in one fashion or another, and decides to write a gospel that's completely different than the other gospels, totally turning over a lot of the messages that are contained in the previous gospels. So basically what you have is one witness who claims some magical supernatural shit, and then other people years and years later that take his story, change it a little bit, and then proclaim it as their own. So you don't actually have 4 different people or different people claiming these things. You have one person that has no citation of sources, has no verifiable authorship in it, has no way of knowing whether or not he got it from firsthand eyewitness accounts, and then other people change his account. That's it. That's all that you got, and it's not impressive.
All right, so first, let me just address the eyewitness testimony. I'm going to come back to that, what you just said. First, it is 100% proven that eyewitness testimony can put somebody in jail for life. So that's not even a debate or argument. Eyewitness testimony in court can put somebody in jail in life. So that's not even a debate, bro. Like that's. Are we
talking about
Dre,
court though?
Yeah, Dre, I'm sorry to interrupt you because we were just talking for a long time and I realized you just started speaking, but like, is that really the point you want to make? Like, yes, eyewitness testimony can put someone in jail for life. That doesn't mean that it's good or reliable. That's just means that our justice system kind of sucks. Like that's not really a good argument for what we're talking about here. You admitted yourself a moment ago that if we both saw a car wreck right now, we would have different stories. So the question is eyewitness testimony good? Not whether or not it's used.
I put it like this. I'm not going to say whether it's good, bad, or reliable, but what I will say is eyewitness testimony has to be taken into consideration.
It's not eyewitness testimony.
It's not eyewitness testimony though.
Can we agree on that? Can we agree on eyewitness testimony has to be taken into consideration at the very least?
Sure. Yeah, I can agree on that. It's just the issue is that that's not really a factor at play here. I can also say that DNA evidence needs to be taken into account, but we don't have any of that either. It's kind of an irrelevant point.
I get you. Okay, so let me go back to what he was just talking about. The whole date.
And also, I'm sorry, I really do apologize. I really don't mean to be cutting you off so much, but this cross-examiner, who is again the one of our other hosts, he's a lawyer. He just put in our host chat here. We have found hundreds of people on death row that were convicted by eyewitness testimony and later exonerated by DNA evidence. So even just to your point that this is a very powerful thing, it is because it is so fallible. It is such a big problem. And while, yes, you should take it into account, you should not put as much weight on it as you are putting on it.
I get that. And I don't disagree at all. Not at all. I get that. I was just saying, it's a point of consideration. That's the only point I was making. Okay, so now to the dates where he was talking about these different scriptures were written and how they was written. Now we have to apply logic. So this is why I said in the beginning, history, consistency, and logic. So logically, everything he just said is not logical, bro. It's not logical at all. Everything he's talking about when the scriptures came out, the dates, and 90 AD and all that, is not logical at all. First off, we have to know that Jerusalem was taken down. The Israelites were killed. Some of them escaped. Some of them were captured. We know this happened in 70 AD. Now let's apply the scriptures. We know that one of the earliest known Paul letters to the churches, to the Roman church to be precise, I believe, was 39 AD. We know that Paul, another one of Paul's letters was around 50 or 55 AD. Let's just take that into account first. Now, when we look at that right there, Paul was quoting from the Gospels.
No, he wasn't.
He was scripture.
No. Okay, so he patently wasn't. I can actually prove this. I can prove this. So Paul was not quoting from the scriptures, and one of the biggest indications of this. And I'm sorry that I'm going to be speaking really fast right here. I'm just trying to get through this as fast as I can.
We got to go anyway, so go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically in Mark, there's this statement about, divorce and all of this stuff. I believe it's either divorce or taxes. I can't remember which. But in either case, one of those particular topics, the Mark has Jesus saying these things, right? Well, then if you go and you look at Paul talking about the exact same subject, what Paul says is that this is not a commandment from the Lord. This is my own opinion, right? So he's totally separating like his statements on this particular topic. Again, I can't remember which one it is. It's either divorce or taxes. Sorry about that, but it's one of those two. And he says, this is my opinion. It's not a commandment from the Lord. But then Mark says, oh, Jesus actually says this thing that Paul said. And so as we can tell, and as scholarship has advanced in this particular field, that Mark was actually using Paul's epistles, like his letters to these various churches, in order to generate a lot of the things that Jesus says in his gospel and a lot of the theology that appears in Mark's gospel. So we definitely know for a fact that Mark was coming after Paul. Paul was definitely writing before Mark, but Mark was never written during the time of Paul, and he was only written after Paul was killed at some point through whatever kind of means. We're not exactly sure how he was killed. There's multiple different stories about that, but the fact is that Mark definitely comes after Paul.
That's not true, bro.
Okay.
Trust me, bro. That's his evidence. Trust me, bro. You're not.
That's frustrating. Okay. Dre, listen, we've been on this call for 45 minutes, and I feel like we've really gotten nowhere because fundamentally we're having a disagreement over like what evidence is and whether or not it matters. So I encourage you to call back because I really do think that this was almost productive, and I feel like we could get somewhere. So we got to move on because we're already like 30 minutes overtime on the show, and we got one other call that the producers really want us to take. So we got to let you go, but I hope you do call back and talk to us a little bit more about this God and why you think it's real. Okay.
All good. I enjoyed the conversation.
I did not mean to cut him off. I am an asshole. I thought it was just long silence, and I clicked the button, and he started talking right then. I did enjoy the conversation sometimes. Like, there's a couple parts of it that were a little frustrating, but like, I think that I think if we could agree with Dre on what evidence is and if evidence matters, then we could maybe get a little bit further. But I think first we'd have to get out of the bubble of what he thinks logic is. Before we end the show, first of all, you can get your AXP merchandise at tiny.cc/merchaca. Check that out. We got all sorts of new stuff there. I also want to give a big thank you to the crew who put this show together. We got video operators, audio operators, note takers, call screeners. We got mods in the chat. We got all sorts of people who do that. We've also got a couple of super chats here. Rainbow Wolf sent in $4.99. If you're trying to defend slavery, you have lost the moral argument. If God can be used to defend slavery and genocide, what can it not defend? We've got Native Atheists, $10. Thank you for all the work you do from Norman, Oklahoma. Miranda Rensberger sent $5. Why is it so hard to agree that owning a human being is wrong? We got I'm not even going to try to pronounce that mixture. It looks like it says David Haysor. I tried and it worked. I think sent $5 Canadian. God spent half of the 10 Commandments being jealous and forgot about slavery. We've got a bunch of other people in here, and I'm sorry. Oh, David Hacker. There's a bunch of other super chats. I'm not going to be able to get through them all. But we've got one last call on the line that we're going to take, and that is Mr. Michael, pronouns he, them, calling in from Generous Apples. Fucking what? Who is calling specifically about Exodus 21 verses 22 through 25. How does two men accidentally killing a pregnant woman in the Bible equate to a woman having abortion, as some people claim? That is what it says on the call screen. I'm going to look up that verse really quick. Mr. Michael, pardon me. You are on AXP with John and Forrest. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm blessed. I'm ready for eternal life. I'm ready to let God save you through my testimony, hopefully. How
no,
are
thank
you doing?
So I'm looking up I'm doing great. No, thank you to that though. I'm looking up this verse that says, if men strive and hurt a woman with a child, these should be punished according to the woman's husband, blah, 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 blah. If she mischief should follow. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth. So it looks like this is talking about something else. I don't know what this has to do with abortion. What argument are you hearing?
All right, so I watched this video by Holy Kool-Aid, and I already responded to it, and a lot of atheists like to use this part of Exodus to justify abortion, because in Exodus, if you cause a miscarriage, then you have to pay a fine, versus according to them, killing a woman, then you have to be put to death, which is not true.
I feel like there's a misrepresentation of the actual argument here. I'm sorry to step in. I know that I'm kind of interrupting you, but I feel like at least the argument that I've actually interacted with, it has been that this is evidence that they didn't consider a fetus to be like a whole person, because you just paid a fine for the fetus dying, and not that you killed another person. So like, I feel like you're being I'm not going to say that you're being disingenuous, but maybe you're just misunderstanding the argument, because this is actually evidence that that they didn't consider fetuses to be full-blown people. So that's what the actual argument is.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. I was trying to figure out how the hell that's talking about abortion, but yeah, it's the idea that there's a different punishment for a fetus versus a person.
It's not, because in the Exodus verse, it's talking about paying a fine if you injure or kill a woman. And in Exodus, if you actually
they considered women property.
Hold on. That's it. Hold on. Can I finish my statement?
Okay.
My statement?
Yeah.
Okay. You ready for me? All right. I'm sorry.
I can't tell if you're serious.
I hate when people interrupt me. And I mean seriously autistic, not like in a white boy version or nothing like that. But
what does that fucking mean?
What is that?
Because white people tend to use
I'm just gonna
autism.
I'm just gonna stop you right there. We're like, if you're a troll, it just be done with it. Like I'm bored. We actually could have a productive conversation, or we could not. Like, what do you want to do, dude?
Okay, let me jump back to the point. You asked me to explain. Let me jump back to the point. But anywho, I wanted to like in the verse, it's actually not talking about killing a person if you killed a woman accidentally. It's talking about paying a fee for injuring a woman. It's not talking about killing a woman. And even if it's talking about like go ahead.
It's talking about killing a fetus. It says, if men strife and hurt a woman with child, so that her fruits depart from her, and yet no mischief follow, then he shall be punished according to the woman's husband will lay upon him, whatever that means, and he shall pay as the judge has determined. So he's saying if you cause a woman to miscarry, then you have to pay a fine. The very next verse, like the very next one from that section, it's verse 24 here, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So the Bible's very clear. If you do something to somebody, you get that exact same thing back. It's going to be equal. There's going to be equal punishment. It's often said they don't mean this literally. You don't have to take your eye out if you take someone's eye. You have to have the repercussion, that the compensation has to be of equal value to the damage that you caused. And they're saying here that the equal value to causing a miscarriage is a fine. So it's not at the level of human life.
And the equal value of causing any damage to the woman is also a fine. If it was
because she's property.
Because she's property.
Pardon me?
Because she's property. She's a wife. She's property. It's sexual servitude.
Well, actually, it doesn't say a wife. It just says a woman. But that might
sure, but like
semantics.
Oh my God, we can read the context of the Israelites at this time. If she was pregnant, she was a wife. Like there weren't single pregnant mothers in Israel like that. I mean, I'm not going to say that there wasn't those, but I'm just saying that the most likely scenario for the reference here is a married woman who is injured and is forced to miscarry, and then therefore whoever forced her to miscarry has to pay the husband. If she wasn't married, like let's just say that she was raped by somebody and impregnated and everything like that, which is horrible in general, but then they would have to pay the father. Like it's still like you're not paying the woman, you're paying the father, you're paying the husband.
Right.
Like the father's dead.
No, it says what John just said is really important. There is a part in this I remember that talks about like if you rape a virgin, you just pay her father money.
Right.
Like that's the thing. It's the same. Yes, you're right. There is also a numerical value to like bodily autonomy for women in general. That isn't making the argument I think you think that it is.
About that, it's talking about premarital sex. It's already discussed in Genesis 38 that if you rape a woman, you cannot marry her to settle it.
No. If you rape a woman, no. Hold on. We got to correct this. If you rape a woman, you have to pay a fine and you are forced to marry her. And so the victim is forced to marry her rapist, and you cannot divorce her at all. Like it specifically says you may not divorce her. Like you're married to her for life.
Also, like the whole beginnings of this thing is that you said that we shouldn't be using this verse to justify abortion. There's another part. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's in Numbers where they actually give detailed instructions. If you think that your wife has been unfaithful to you and is pregnant with another man's baby, then you're supposed to take her to the temple and the priest mixes some dirt into some water and then she drinks that. And if she has been unfaithful, she will then miscarry. That uses an abortion not only as a punishment, but as like a fidelity test. So like the Bible explains how to do abortions in that particular respect. Why didn't we go to that one if that's what we're talking about?
That's not
also, who gives a fuck what the Bible says about abortions? That's another question.
That's not an abortion. You don't drink dirty water to miscarry. That's not an abortion.
Well, so what does it describe in that section right there? Like, what is that? They have to drink the dirty temple floor water, and then something happens. What is that something that happens?
It's talking about an infertile curse that's brought forth by the Israelites if the woman is unfaithful. That's not abortion. Abortion.
No.
is
So
not-
if the woman is, yeah.
I'm sorry. It specifically says that if this woman is pregnant and the husband suspects that she's been unfaithful, you take her to the priest, and the priest writes this word in the book, and blah blah blah, and she drinks this. They call it bitter water over and over. And if she has been unfaithful, then drinking this magic potion will cause her belly to swell and her thighs to rot, is what it says in my version. But that's just my translation, is that it causes her to miscarry. And so like that's what it's saying, is you will induce a miscarriage on purpose because this person is unfaithful. A deliberately induced miscarriage is an abortion. There's one of the versions of it.
Now,
Yeah, and it's actually a worse kind of abortion, because I do believe that it says that it causes her to be like infertile, like for the
it says something else about that's where it gets into the curse bit. But like the whole point is that you are terminating a pregnancy. Like no matter how you slice this woman is pregnant, then she drinks this water, and then she is not pregnant anymore. So it is terminating a pregnancy. That is what abortion is.
ask you something. Could I ask you something? If somebody drinks alcohol and then they have a miscarriage, is that an abortion to you?
If they deliberately use the alcohol in order to cause a miscarriage, then yes, that would be a very illegal and fucked up way to do it. But yeah.
Wait a minute. Why is it a fucked up way to do it when the alternative is just putting a needle in your stomach? Why is it
not the alternative?
The needle
to drink alcohol?
What do you know about abortions?
I don't think you know how abortions work, but like the main thing is that the concept of abortion is just deliberately terminating a pregnancy. That's what an abortion is, more or less. Like that's the definition I would give for it. Maybe if there's somebody out there who's a doctor who wants to give a more detailed or specific one, that's great. But the definition of abortion, as far as I know, is deliberately terminating a pregnancy, no matter how you do it.
So if I stress my girlfriend out to the point where she miscarries, did I do an abortion?
If you are deliberately, you and her together are deliberately using stress as a way to terminate a pregnancy, then it would be a very skewed version of it. It would be a stretch to call it that, but strictly technically speaking, it would be in that vein. The point is, you are terminating a pregnancy deliberately. That is what that is. Now, there's different ways to do that. There's medical ways. There's mechanical ways. There's all sorts of ways. But at the end of the day, deliberately terminating a pregnancy is abortion, or at least that's what we're going with here.
So basically, nearly everything. So basically, nearly everything is abortion to you. Like if you drink alcohol, that's abortion. If I kick my girlfriend out to stress her so much that she miscarries,
first of all,
you can have a miscarriage, which is an accidental thing. A miscarriage is not deliberate. Most pregnancies, a huge, I don't know if I want to say most, but a vast number of pregnancies end in miscarriage. That's not abortion. If people drink or smoke or get stressed out and have a miscarriage, that's not abortion. Deliberately ending a pregnancy is what I would use the term abortion there. The mode by which you do that is not really relevant to the definition.
You just said if somebody drinks alcohol and they have a miscarriage, that's abortion. But now
no, you're misrepresenting what Forrest said.
If they drink alcohol with the intended purpose of drinking enough alcohol to destroy their pregnancy, the intention is the key. If you could use alcohol, you could use fucking vitamins and shit. Like there's a lot of things you could do to induce a miscarriage, to cause that to happen, which is what abortion is all about. There's this old saying of potions, poisons, and long-handled spoons is the way it was. You drink all these different potions and poisons and concoctions, or use a long-handled spoon. You're inducing a miscarriage. That is what abortion is.
How does a long-handled spoon induce an abortion?
You would use it to like disrupt the mucus plug in the cervix and to damage the fetus. It would be a mechanical thing.
Oh, just like one of those hangers.
Yeah, a coat hanger is another symbol of what we call a back alley abortion. A coat hanger is another symbol of an unsafe way that people have turned to have an abortion when they needed one, because it was not legal for them to do it safely. So they turned to this very unsafe, very dangerous method. It's kind of a symbol of like medical repression and how fucked up our medical system is and our legal system is that allows for something like that. This horrific thing that somebody has to do in order to get the dignity and the rights and the care that they deserve. Yeah. Are we going anywhere with this, or are we just talking about how much you don't understand abortion?
Let me finish. Well, I'm not a female. I have never got an abortion. Maybe you have. I know that. I don't know what's going down there with you, so I don't know. But
that is a weird fucking statement to make. You literally just told Forrest, I don't know what your genitals look like, so I can't say whether or not you've had an abortion.
I mean, that's fair though. That's fair. That's almost polite. I appreciate that he didn't make an assumption. That's great.
That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
I have also never had an abortion. I was waiting for that to devolve into transphobia. I'll be honest with you. I was waiting for the bullshit. I really was. I was waiting for the pivot. Be like, well, I know you think that women's and men's and stuff and the trans people's. I was waiting for it to get nutty. Mr. Michael, it's been a weird 14 minutes, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to even spend 5 on this one. So, like, do you have anything else that's like coherent to say, or are we done?
Okay. I'd just like to thank you for defending me. I didn't want to jump to the conclusion on your gender, because I know like there's a lot of male presenting females and there's a lot of females presenting males. So I get that. And I thank you for...
I'm a cisgender man.
All right, cool. Thank you for clarifying that. In California, they actually charge women for drinking alcohol to the point where they miscarriage children, and they charge them with murder. Do you feel that this is a just charge?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. As far as calling it murder, I don't know. As far as calling that a crime, having that be an issue, yeah, I have an issue with that. But whether or not murder is the correct charge, I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little bit more.
Why do you have an issue with that?
Because I support abortion access. So like if they don't have access to abortion and they chose to do it in a horrible way, I can't fault them. So I'm going to finish what I was saying. If they don't have access to a safe and legal abortion and they choose to do it in a horrible way, then like I would have a different set of rules for that. I do have an issue with the idea of drinking a bunch of alcohol when you're pregnant, because we know that does damage. Like if you complete the pregnancy and you give birth to this child, then that child is going to have some problems, or is like a significant risk of having a lot of problems. So yes, I think that is wrong, and I have an issue with that, and I can understand having a punishment for that. But specifically saying I tried to get an abortion and I couldn't do it legally, so I did it in this way, which is horrible. That's a totally different concept that I would have a lot more compassion for, even if I do think that it's wrong. And if I do think that should be some punishment for it, I don't know if murder is the charge that I would attach to that, because I don't think that fetuses are people. Shown to like actually reduce abortion is like comprehensive sex education, easy access to contraception, like empowerment of women so that they have control over their destinies, their education, those are things that actually increase or decrease abortion rates. Criminalizing abortion and making abortion murder and all these different things, all that does is it drives up unsafe abortion. It doesn't actually reduce abortion rates. It drives up illegal, back alley, unsafe, dangerous abortion rates. But with that, Mr. Michael, this is a weird conversation and I'm a little bit bored of it, so I'm going to move on. I'll talk to you later, or maybe not. Bye. I honestly wasn't interested in what else he was going to say. I didn't want to let him have the last word, because like if someone's going to try to distinguish between white autism and shit. Like, that's fucking God.
Yeah, and I do want to let people know, if they want to read for themselves, go to Numbers 5, start at 20 and read to 22 or through 21. It literally says, that the woman miscarries. So I mean, it's literally in the verse that it's like, this will cause a miscarriage.
Yep. With that, it's been a wild show. We had a lot of other callers on the line, but we weren't able to get to them. We're already an hour over time. So I'm sorry if you called in and we didn't get to you. But it's the way that it works. But I really appreciate you calling in, and I hope you call again sometime soon. With that, though, John, do you have any last words before we proceed to close the show?
No, I mean, I'm putting out content over there over on my channel, frequently during the week and everything like that. And, I'm doing a lot of great stuff over there. And I'm also on TikTok. I'm doing a lot of TikTok, like live streams and stuff where I take people up and I talk to them there. So if you definitely want to come and check that out, I see the thing on the screen right now. I've got an app on the app stores called Crestus, talking about mythicism and stuff. So I'm about to get the Android version updated. If you want to wait just maybe like a day or two, I'm going to get that put up there. So, but anyways, that's pretty much it for me.
Right on. I am also on them internets. Go check out my channel if you like science, atheism, and general weirdness. And if you really want to make the world a better place, you can watch my Roll for Initiative series and donate to Doctors Without Borders through that series. It'd be really cool of you to do that. But for that, this has been the Atheist Experience, brought to you by the Atheist Community of Austin. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay sciencey, stay skeptical, have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? Think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your life.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.